Good morning, and thank you all for joining us here this morning. My name is Ruth Swanson, and I'm the program manager with District 180. And this morning we are going to share lots of resources and information with you about additional targeted support and improvement, what that all means, and in developing your improvement plan moving forward. So I will pass it over to Trey Smallwood, who is our TSI consultant, to get us started this morning.
Good morning, everyone. So today we're going to be looking at a few different things around ATSI. So we will review the identification criteria for ATSI schools. We will examine the school's improvement requirements for ATSI. We will understand the next steps involved in the improvement planning process for ATSI schools. And we become familiar with the available supports and resources for ATSI schools. We are lucky today to be joined by our continuous improvement coaches here at KDE, as well as the Office of Special Education and Early Learning and the Office of Teaching and Learning. So one big question we get asked a lot is, why do we identify targeted support and improvement in ATSI schools? So this is a federal requirement under the Every Student Succeeds Act. It requires states to identify schools for TSI and ATSI, specifically because many students in these targeted subgroups have been historically underserved in education. They often face achievement gaps, so ESSA mandates that states track their performance individually. When any of these subgroups underperforms at a school, the school is identified for TSI and then ATSI to ensure that there is targeted interventions and so we can foster a more equitable education system. So specifically looking at ATSI this year, the entrance criteria was that you had to be a TSI school in the immediately preceding year to fall of 2025 and have one or more subgroups performing as poorly as all students in the lowest 5% of Title I schools or non-Title I schools by school level. So it is identified in 2025, and then every 3 years, it is re-identified. One thing is that this does start the timeline for possible comprehensive support and improvement designation, or CSI, in fall of 2028. Here you can see a list of the federally defined student demographic groups or the subgroups. They include white, African American, Hispanic or Latino, Asian, Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, American Indian or Alaska Native, 2 or more races, free or reduced price meal eligible, students with disabilities who have an individual education plan or an IEP, and English learners. Some schools may be identified for ATSI or TSI for more than one of these subgroups. So every school who is identified as TSI or ATSI will have to revise their CSIP, their Comprehensive School Improvement Plan, to include the TSI or ATSI addendum. So a school identified for TSI or ATSI has to revise that CSIP with the involvement of local school personnel and other stakeholders. This is including the principal, school leaders, teachers, parents, and the site-based decision-making council. This is in the revised statute under KRS 160.346. All TSI and ATSI improvement plans are required to address all components of the CSIP, including all the diagnosis associated with the development of that plan. For example, the needs assessment. If you made your needs assessment before the KSA data came out and you want to revise that needs assessment, that is completely appropriate. School stakeholders should carefully consider what has to be done in order for their specific subgroups to perform at high levels in the state accountability system. Additional requirements addressed in the addendum will inform strategies and activities within the CSIP that supports the specific needs of these underperforming groups. So when we have a TSI school improvement plan that is also serves as your CSIP, the local Board of Education must review and approve the new school improvement plan for each ATSI school. This should be done annually as long as the school is identified as ATSI. When a school is identified for ATSI, the local education agency or the district should provide additional monitoring and support. So the local education agency must monitor and provide ongoing support to ensure that the plan is successful. We will also speak about the CDIP, or the Comprehensive District Improvement Plan, and the addendum that will be included with that in more detail later. So there's some additional requirements for a school identified for ATSI versus a school identified for TSI. The district must take more rigorous district-determined action to assist and support the school in reaching the performance goals. This is district-determined because we understand that different schools and districts have different local context. And so it really falls on the district to take this more rigorous action. You may want to think, how would the district determine what additional and more rigorous actions are needed in order to assist the school in reaching their performance goal? And how would the district implement and monitor these actions? Again, if the school does not exit ATSI status after 3 years, the school will be designated for CSI status. I am going to turn it over to Ruth to talk about next steps in improvement planning.
Great, thank you. So yeah, we want to take the rest of our time today to provide some guidance and resources to help you take that next step in your improvement planning. And as Trey said, we have colleagues from across KDE who are here to share with you today. As Trey mentioned, hopefully your needs assessment was submitted by that November 1 deadline, but we know now that you've gotten your identification and the final data has come out, you may want to revisit that. So we do suggest that your team reviews that in light of your identification. You want to be sure that your goals and strategies and activities that are going to be included in this revised improvement plan really address the needs of all students, especially those in your targeted subgroups. We have a couple of improvement coaches with us today who have experience supporting improvement planning all over the state. And so I'll let them introduce themselves and share a little bit more information about what will be beneficial for determining needs and some possible strategies moving forward.
Good morning. I'm Jenny Donnelly, and my colleague Jewett Wells is with me today, and we are a part of a team of continuous improvement coaches, like Ruth said. And really, we're here today just to talk a little bit about key core work processes and the needs assessment, but also to introduce ourselves and let you all know that we are a support for you all and other schools and districts across the state. At the end of today's webinar, there'll be a slide with a link to some of our supports and services. So you're more than welcome to reach out and contact us. So with that being said, key core work processes, we're all familiar with them because they are the critical work that occurs within our schools. And during our needs assessment, we should be analyzing those to look for not only areas of improvement, but also to really look for those strengths within our systems that we can build on. So this is what our key core work processes look like. We're really just talking about this to sort of give you some suggestions in case when you did your needs assessment, you didn't use this process. We suggest that with your team, your leadership team, or some of your stakeholders, your teachers, that you really take a close look at those operational definitions, read the guiding questions, and then think about what evidence do you currently have of those systems being in place? And again, are they areas that we need to work on or leverages that we have within our building? And just like Ruth said, you might think about going back, even though your needs assessment has already been submitted, and looking at these guiding questions again, specifically through the lens of your subgroup. And again, this is just reiterating that process that we suggest, looking at those definitions, the guiding questions for evidence. Sometimes we even suggest a highlighting process so you can kind of rank where you're at with each of those systems. I'm going to let Jewett talk a little bit more about some of those next steps to dig a little bit deeper.
Sorry, I had a hard time getting my microphone to unmute. So like Jenny said, I think that most of you probably went through some sort of needs assessment process as part of phase 2 when you were developing your CSIP. If you did not take the time to go through that, I would encourage you to take this time of reflection upon your subgroup, having been identified, and go back through that process to really dig in and think about, like Jenny and Ruth have both reiterated, through the lens of that subgroup, how those key core work processes and those big systems within your school are being impacted and what may need to change. And because oftentimes we find that when we work with schools from year to year on developing their CSIPs, they just kind of roll over the work that they've been doing over the past few years, which is completely valid if that work is still working for you and helping you to make improvements within your school. But once you have an identification of an ATSI or TSI or even CSI, it's clear that something's not working the way that you need for it to. So if you find yourself in this position and you think, okay, well, we've been doing this over and over every year in our CSIP and kind of repeating and modifying just a little bit to fit our new context from year to year, there may be a deeper issue. So there may be a root cause that you're not getting to that's preventing you from really having success. So if you take a look at that second bullet on this slide that says conduct further root cause analysis if needed, often schools don't need to do any further root cause analysis, but if you are finding yourself in a place with a federal classification and you're realizing that the work that you're doing is not giving you what it needs, or you're not meeting the needs of a particular group of students, it may be especially beneficial to you to engage in some type of root cause analysis around whatever key core work process you've identified. So this would be a next step. For example, if you identify instruction as a key core work process, an area that you really need to improve, and you've identified that in your CSIP, you may need to dig in just to instruction and ask yourself through the lens of, if you're, let's say your subgroup that is put you into ATSI status or to TSI status is your students with disabilities. You may think, okay, within the area of instruction, how are we really impacting or meeting the needs of our students with disabilities? And we can take that through a SWOT analysis, which, if you're not familiar with that, that stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So ask yourself, within instruction for our special ed population, what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? Where are there some opportunities for us to improve or to grow? Or what are some unique opportunities that we have within our context? Community members that can support us, or whatever the case may be. And then what are those threats or barriers that may prevent us from having success? So really taking the time to dig in very deeply into each of those key core work processes, or just the ones that you've identified through your needs assessment, could really help you to identify some key areas you need to focus on. It also could help you with that addendum piece. So the additional piece that you have to complete in addition to your regular CSIP. Some of the questions on there ask you to think about things like resource inequities, or how you're preparing your staff to support the subpopulation. And Ruth's going to get into a little bit more of that more specifically in a minute. But by going through that SWOT analysis process, or that further root cause analysis, it could really help you to identify some key things that you may need to consider as you work to support that group. So when you think about that review of the previous plan, kind of goes along with that root cause analysis. Think about, is that work really serving you? Oftentimes we'll see schools who review that previous plan and they say, okay, well, we started this initiative last year, and so we're going to continue that into this year because it's kind of a 3 to 5 year implementation process, which is completely valid. But as you think about that, we can't just copy over from last year's plan exactly the same thing, because clearly that didn't work for us the way that we needed it to. So we need to do a little bit more thought process. We need to do a little bit more analysis of what happened and why it didn't work, so that as we modify that for our new plan moving forward, we've really considered where it needs to be refined in order to give us what we need. So Ruth, are you going to talk about this part? Okay, that's what I thought. Yep. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't anything else you wanted me to say.
Nope, you got it. Thank you. And I apologize. I am not able to attach anything in the chat for some reason right now, but we will make sure that everyone gets a copy of the PowerPoint slides. So let's talk specifics about the improvement plan requirements. It's important to first understand that the CSIP is your ATSI improvement plan. It will have some additional elements. that need to be embedded in those strategies and activities. And we'll talk about each of the components in depth, but they include what's listed here on the slide. First of all, you want to think about your leadership team and what they might need to be able to guide successful turnaround. You'll want to be thinking about how you currently use your resources and if that is creating any barriers for certain students. You'll need to research and cite at least one practice or intervention that has evidence showing that it is indeed effective. And you'll also want to take a look more generally at your learning environment to see if there are any additional steps that can be taken to really make it more effective for students in your targeted subgroup. So this is the TSI ATSI addendum. It is the same whether you are TSI or ATSI. This can be downloaded from our Comprehensive Improvement Planning webpage on the KDE website. So the addendum includes some questions to consider for each of those additional requirements. I've listed in a place that for your response. So it's important that when you respond that you answer each question in each section, because as we go through here, you'll see that some sections include more than one question. So make sure that you are addressing all the questions in there. And then once all your responses are completed, what you'll do is upload that addendum along with your goal building template in the Cognia Continuous Improvement Platform, or eProve, or My Journey, however you refer to it as. So let's break down each of those requirements now a little deeper. The first one is about turnaround leadership. So take just 30 seconds here and kind of consider what comes to mind when you think about or hear turnaround leadership. What might be involved in that? And feel free to add anything in the chat if you care to. Thank you, Autumn. She mentioned objective analysis of data. So those descriptors actually, or what in the addendum, what you're asked to kind of think about is how will you ensure that your school leadership either has or develops the skills and the disposition to achieve, and here's the descriptors that are important: accelerated, meaningful, and sustainable increases in student achievement for underperforming subgroups. So accelerated, meaningful, and sustainable. Those descriptors actually come from the definition of turnaround from Kentucky statute. So you'll see in KRS 160.346, it defines turnaround as a comprehensive transformation. So not just, one little activity, but a comprehensive transformation of a school to achieve, and here's those descriptors: accelerated, meaningful, and sustainable increases in student achievement. And that is done through improved school leadership and school district support. So that's what this element is asking you to think about. Through improved school leadership and district support, which are two of those key responsibilities in the TSI and ATSI process that Trey shared a little bit earlier. So another source that we look to for turnaround leadership guidance is the Professional Standards for Educational Leaders, or PSEL standards, which if you're a principal or a district person, you're very familiar with. Standard 10 is actually about turnaround leadership. And so it talks about, or practice 10, standard 10 outlines what effective leaders do as agents of continuous improvement. So as we go through this, I'm not going to read each of these to you, but if you're a principal or a district leader supporting principals, this is a great kind of self-assessment opportunity to inform your response to how you will ensure that your leadership has the capacity to lead turnaround efforts in your targeted student subgroups. So letter C, for example, talks about preparing your school and your community for improvement. As we're going through here, we're talking about change, and we know that change can be hard. So one of the elements is preparing your staff and stakeholders. So is your leadership team prepared to do that, able to do that, or do they need some additional skills in that area? If we look at letter G on this slide, it talks about data systems. Autumn mentioned data analysis. So we know that there's a well-known idea that systems are actually designed to get the results that they get, meaning that the outcomes of any system are the result of the structure, the processes, and the components, whether that be intentional or unintentional. So Jenny and Jewett went through, described that process of using the key core work processes to look at your specific processes. We know that Key Core Work Process 3 is about design and deliver assessment literacy, and Key Core Work Process 4 is about reviewing and analyzing data results. So is that an area of strength for your leadership team? Is that an area that they might need some additional training or support in? And then letter G on this slide says to develop and promote leadership among staff. So remember, one of the responsibilities that Trey shared about was the involvement of school personnel and other stakeholders in revising the CSIP. So does your leadership team need to work on increasing stakeholder involvement during this process? So we've kind of quickly gone through some things to think about in terms of transformation or turnaround leadership. So take just a minute and think about, or maybe jot down what you might include in your response about how you will ensure that your school leadership has or develops those turnaround leadership skills. And are there certain elements from that standard 10 that jumped out at you to really focus on moving forward? So we wanted to share an example of a response that a school might put in the leadership section. For this particular school, they said that they're going to focus on comprehensive leadership development strategies to emphasize both skills and mindsets. And so they're talking about having more targeted professional development for their school leaders. They're talking about having some coaching and mentoring opportunities for the leadership team. And then they're talking about some additional tracking and accountability to make sure that they are able to sustain the efforts and to really monitor those efforts moving forward. So the next additional requirement asks you to look at how resources are currently being allocated and used. So is the current process creating barriers or inequities that might be contributing to the underperformance? So the question in this section asks you to describe a process that you're going to do to review your resources. So what data did you look at? Who was at the table? And then you're going to need to identify any inequities that you found, that you uncovered through this process. And then more importantly, how you're going to address those inequities. So we'll take a little look at that. A couple of terms as you're thinking about inequities. When we're talking about resources and equity, so equity means access to resources, supports, and opportunity based on individual need. Not that everybody gets the same thing, but making sure that they have access according to their needs. And then resources, we want to think about things that are assets as well as capacities that fulfill that need for the students and support the learning environment. So we generally think of these in terms of either material or maybe digital and human resources. So as you review your resources, you want to keep those definitions in mind. So together, those definitions kind of create the resource equity definition, that it refers to the allocation and use of resources, which could be people, time, and money, to create student experiences that enable all children to reach those learning outcomes. So you're going to be looking at things like time, schedules, materials, access to rigorous content, access to quality teaching. So again, through the lens of your targeted subgroup, do students have access to what they need? Do schedules allow for core as well as specialized instruction? Are the materials that they have access to rigorous and updated? So thinking about what that looks like for a student in your targeted subgroup. Cognia also has a standard. We utilize Cognia standards, partner with them in our improvement work. And so they have a standard that specifically focuses on resources. And so standard 15, the definition of the standard said that learners' needs drive the allocation and management of those resources. And so in order for that to happen, it talks about professional staff members needing to engage in a systematic process to analyze learners' needs and current trends, and that informing the way that they allocate and use their resources. And so adjusting the allocation doesn't mean that you budget and you use your resources the same way every year. Jewett brought this up a little bit as well. Let's say if your Title I funds aren't getting the results that you need, do we need to look at how we're using those differently? Is your schedule allowing all students to have access to quality teaching of, rigorous core instruction? So really looking for areas where your targeted subgroups may not have the access that they need according to their need. So again, take just a 30 seconds, a minute here to kind of think about how you might answer that resource and equities questions. Or you might want to be thinking about what data and what people you need to bring to the table to be having this discussion. So here's an example of a school that is responding to those questions. So they talked about how the SBDM Council and the leadership team regularly look at the budget, including state, local, and federal funds. They also look at schedules, and they're trying to identify, any areas of insufficiency for their targeted subgroup. They did note that in this particular school year, 25-26, many of students with disabilities remain in resource settings and are not getting the access to core instruction that they need. They also mentioned that co-teaching, teachers are not fully prepared to go into a co-teaching situation. And so notice one of the most important things they do is address, okay, what are we going to do about that? So they've talked about training and coaching around that co-teaching model that's going to occur, in the winter and the spring, and that with the goal of more students receiving core instruction through that co-teaching model. They also mentioned that they're going to hire a work-based learning coordinator who will be hired to specifically support students with disability in achieving post-secondary readiness. So their needs assessment identified that as an issue for them. Here's another example. This one talks about the process that they went through to review the allocation. They talk about the data they collected. Some of the things they looked at is how teachers and support staff are distributed. They looked at how instructional time is used. They looked at how school funds are allocated. And then they also looked at their stakeholder involvement. School and district leadership teachers and the SBDM collaborated in that review process. And so through that analysis, the issues that they found or the inequities that they identified were that certain subgroups had less access to experienced and certified teachers. Instructional time was disproportionately allocated to non-core subjects, particularly in classes with high numbers of students with disabilities. And then funding was not sufficiently targeted toward programs supporting their English learners and students with disabilities. From there, we also want to make sure that they address how they're going to do that. And I think I skipped that slide. There we go. To address those inequities. So they're going to look at redistributing staff. They're going to look at how their time is allocated and make changes there. They're going to target some funding specifically for tutoring for English learners and specialized services for students with disabilities. And then they're really looking at ramping up their monitoring and making adjustments along the way. So if you're thinking about how they're going to address these, we should see these types of activities in their CSIP strategies and activities as they're moving forward. So the third requirement then asks you to review the learning culture. And so what in the school and what is the school and classroom environment or experience like for students in your targeted subgroup? So again, this asks you to describe a process that you use to review the learning culture. So what is it that you looked at? Who was at the table to kind of take a look at this? And then what additional actions did you determine might be needed? So let's take a little closer look at that. Cognia does have a section devoted to the culture of learning. And so within their definition of a culture of learning, or the keys to a culture of learning, is that stakeholders are actively engaged and they're supported, that learners' academic and non-academic needs and interests are the focal point, and that stakeholders are included and supported. So really thinking about stakeholders of your identified and targeted subgroup. How are they engaged and supported? How are they included in the work that you're doing? There's also a specific standard. Cognitive Performance Standard 1 says that leaders cultivate and sustain a culture that demonstrates respect and fairness for all learners. And so in order to do that, it says that leaders model the attributes and implement practices that really set clear expectations for all staff, and that the leaders and the professional staff members implement practices and decision-making that really embody those values of respect and fairness for all leaders. So here's an example of how a school might respond to that section. The example describes their process of data and getting input from the school community. They're going to do that through surveys and focus groups. The data that they include had some classroom observations that really focused on culturally responsive teaching and access to resources. And this led them to find disparities in students' access to advanced coursework and in discipline incidents. So that's what they want to address in their additional actions. So most importantly, they're going to do some training. They're going to increase student voice and engagement with families. And so we should see, again, these activities in their CSIP strategies and activities, if this is how they are going to address that learning culture need. So the last requirement that we come to is that your plan must include at least one evidence-based strategy or practice. And this practice needs to specifically address the needs of your targeted subgroup. So after you've identified the needs through your needs assessment process, the key core work process analyzation, you'll need to do some research to find out what programs or instructional models and strategies have been proven effective for students like yours. So when you are considering this, you want to think about what specific needs do the students in your targeted subgroup or subgroups have. You may have students with disabilities as your targeted subgroup, but what are the needs of those students we're talking about? Are there reading disabilities? Are there more speech and language issues? So really digging down to what are the specific needs, not of just that general category, but of the specific students that we're talking about. The second question is critical. These students have been underperforming for several years now since you've been identified for ATSI. So as Jewett was talking about earlier, what has been effective for students in this subgroup so far? And how do you know that? And making sure that things that are not proving to be effective for them, that's where we're making the changes. You do want to think about what all teachers are currently doing and or need to be able to do, and then what specialists are currently doing or need to be able to do as you're thinking about the evidence-based practices. So here's an example. They identified that there have been some improvements in their students with disabilities. However, reading and math indicators were pretty low. And then science and social studies as well. So they've highlighted a few areas for future growth. So they've identified through research that they're going to continue using collaborative teaching models, and they're going to provide staff training that's really focused on parallel and station teaching and the implementation of that. And it's going to be monitored by instructional coaches. And then they talk a little bit more about that monitoring. That's going to be done through walkthroughs. They're going to do student surveys. There's going to have monthly meetings between administrators, teachers, and selected students to kind of set goals. So you can really see the need, the strategy they've chosen to address it, and then how they're going to monitor it. So on the addendum, you will see a section that asks for the evidence-based activity that you've chosen. And it's asking you to provide citation so that anyone who is reading your improvement plan can access that study that you are citing, that piece of research that you are citing. I did notice that this third column here, upload in CSIP, there is nothing additional for this evidence-based practice to be uploaded. You're just going to fill out this table on the addendum. And I did notice the addendum does not include that in there. So I apologize for that still being on the slide. So evidence-based practice could be its own webinar. And in fact, we have done webinars on evidence-based practices. So we did want to provide you with some resources. There is a recorded webinar on our webpage. There is an evidence-based practices webpage within our section on KDE. And then we also provided a link to resources about clearinghouses and databases. So again, reach out to continuous improvement coaches or to our District 180 staff here in Frankfurt if you need assistance in really finding evidence-based practices to meet your needs. So I did want to just kind of reiterate the interventions that you determine and those additional actions that you think are going to be needed need to show up in your strategies and activities along with the progress monitoring and the funding piece in your CSIP. And so we know that that document has changed this year. And so that new goal building template includes the required areas of reading and math as well as achievement gap. So those two areas may be all that's needed to address your ATSI initiatives, especially within that achievement gap section. But let's say you're a high school and post-secondary readiness indicator is one that needs to be focused on. It's especially low for your targeted subgroup. So you may need to add that as an optional goal area to address the needs and the activities in your plan. I did also want to mention timing wise, CSIPs are due by January 1st. That's in statute. We can't make, changes to that deadline. But you may not have completed all the necessary steps to have all those additional requirements included in the plan for that plan to go before the board and be approved before winter break. So you must have a completed goal building template submitted by January 1, but knowing that it's a living document, you can go in and revise and make additions after that date, but you'll want to make sure that you have a board approved ATSI plan uploaded in January. Trey mentioned a couple of responsibilities for the district, and those do show up in the CDIP. So remember that the district is responsible for monitoring and providing support, and that the local board has to review and approve those revised CSIPs. And so there is also an addendum for the CDIP. And so this is the same addendum for TSI schools or CSI schools. And so it asks you, first of all, to describe what the plan is for monitoring and supporting the improvement plan for each and every school that you have that's identified as TSI or CSI. And it asks you to include in your response information regarding the process for local board review and approval. So if you know it's going before the board in December, or if you know it's going at the January board meeting, put that information in there. And then Trey mentioned as well some additional requirements if you have an ATSI school. So if you have a TSI school that failed to exit status this year, which is anyone who got identified for ATSI, it asks what additional actions and supports will be provided and who's going to provide that support. And then it asks you to list any schools that are identified for ATSI and what more rigorous actions will the district take to assist and support the schools, and who's going to be responsible for those actions. So remember, these subgroups have been low performing for several years now, and that's why we got to this ATSI identification. So the district really needs to think about what support and what assistance they can offer that's more rigorous than what they have done in the past. So here's just a quick example. It mentions the district's plan for monitoring is going to include conducting quarterly reviews of their improvement plan, analyzing implementation data and student performance. Each identified school is going to have a dedicated support team from the district, including district personnel and instructional coaches. And then we have stakeholder engagement. They're going to have regular meetings with stakeholders. It looks like somehow, oh, there it goes. Share it again. They're going to have regular meetings with stakeholders to kind of reflect on the needs and how things are going. And so here's how a particular district might list it. Here's the schools that failed to exit TSI. The additional actions is going to be increased professional development, enhanced data monitoring, coaching and mentoring. We have who's going to provide those supports and who's going to be responsible for making sure that that happens. So that's a lot of information about all of those requirements. Are there particular questions that I can answer about those right now? We will have an opportunity at the end. There'll be a link where you can send in any additional questions that you have, but I'll take just a minute here to kind of stop and ask if there's questions about that.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda Waldrop. I'm the Assistant Director at the Division of IDEA Implementation and Preschool in the Office of Special Education and Early Learning. So thank you all for having me here today. So I'm just going to share with you some resources that are available through our office to support students with disabilities. Next slide, please. All right, so all the resources that I'm sharing with you today are available on the KDE webpage. You can access them by clicking Exceptional Children in Early Learning at the top of our webpage. From there, it's going to narrow down to a group of subcategories. And so within those subcategories, you'll click Special Education, and then there's another group of subcategories where you'll click Guidance and Resources, and then you'll see Behavior Resources and Instructional Resources. And so that is where everything is located that I'm going to be sharing with you today. Next slide, please. Additionally, all of the resources that I'm going to be sharing can be accessed through this handout, and so we'll be sure to get that out to you. There are several QR codes that you can access with your phone. There's hyperlinks embedded within the electronic version, and so feel free to print and share this resource with staff at your schools. Next slide, please. So first on the handout that I shared on the previous slide are a set of math resources designed to support students with disabilities. This includes a video series for teachers that demonstrates how to use math manipulatives to provide concrete hands-on learning experiences. So while manipulatives are commonly used in elementary classrooms, they can also be highly effective for middle and high school students. And so the videos in this series are demonstration-based, and they equip educators with practical strategies for integrating manipulatives into instruction. They also offer creative tips for making manipulatives using everyday materials like paper or buttons and other household items when those particular manipulatives are not available. Additionally, the series includes guidance on differentiation and adapting activities to meet a variety of student needs. And so currently we have 5 videos available featuring demonstrations with number lines, counters, fraction manipulatives. Those are just naming a few of them. But we're going to be sure to have more of those posted as well throughout the school year. And so these videos are concise, and they're approximately just 4 to 6 minutes in length. And so they can be accessed using the QR code on the screen. And they're actually the last 5 videos. If you go to that QR code on the screen or click on the link through the PowerPoint, they're going to be the bottom 5 videos if you scroll down. And so again, please check that website throughout the year, because we're going to be sure to add more of those throughout the school year. Next slide, please. And so in addition, we have another math-focused video series designed to support students with disabilities. This series showcases the application of 8 mathematics teaching practices through modeled lesson. And so each video features a teacher delivering a brief instructional segment using avatar students, providing a demonstration of each practice in action. And you can actually see a screenshot of that on the slide as far as what the video looks like. This series spans a wide range of grade levels from preschool through high school. And so you can see the teacher. If you look on the slide, you can see the teacher with the avatar students. And then we also have ASL interpretation as well on all of the videos that I'm sharing with you. And so the reason that we have the screen set up like that with these videos is so that you can see the interaction between the teacher and the students. And so these videos are, also concise. They're about 5 minutes long. And again, they can be accessed using the QR code that was on the previous slide. They're actually the top 10 videos when you go to that QR code. And so again, the math manipulative videos are on the bottom of that. And that's just to ensure that we have all of our math videos located in all one spot. Next slide, please. Next on the handout, there are literacy resources. There is a 4-part video series on literacy strategies, which includes topics such as, language comprehension, phonological awareness. And so the videos, again, they're very similar to the math videos that I shared with you on the previous slide. They show a teacher demonstrating a quick snapshot of a lesson, and all the videos are under 15 minutes. And there's also a foundational literacy toolkit that includes effective literacy practices and resources. And these are available on the instructional resources site through the QR code that's on the screen. And then they're also in that handout as well that we'll be sure to get to you. Next slide, please. Next on the handout are behavior resources. The QR code will take you to a video series developed for special education teachers focusing on effective classroom strategies to support students with disabilities. Currently, there's 9 videos available, each covering a range of topics that you can see on the slide here. And so these videos highlight practical approaches for creating a supportive classroom environment, and they offer proactive strategies to help meet students' needs. And the videos are concise, and you'll notice that's a common trend with all the videos that I'm sharing with you today. They range approximately from about 5 to 10 minutes in length, and they're designed to deliver targeted information efficiently. Each of these videos is also available on the Behavior Resources to Support Students with Disabilities webpage of the KDE website, and it's hyperlinked on the handout that we'll share with you, and it can be accessed using the same click path, that I shared at the beginning of the presentation. Next slide, please. And so this slide just shows a brief example of one of the videos in the series, video 9, supporting bus behavior. This video highlights key content related to transportation settings. It explores common reasons that students may display challenging behaviors during bus rides. It introduces tools that help create a more structured and secure environment for students, and outlines strategies for fostering collaboration between educators and transportation staff. Next slide, please. And so the last item on the handout is a video series on Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. UDL is a proactive framework that helps all learners succeed by removing barriers and offering flexible ways to learn. The UDL video series provides an overview of some of the principles of UDL, and we're going to be adding more of those throughout the school year. Within the videos is a sample from a lesson modeling the strategy. And again, like I said, more videos are going to be added, and they're available on that handout or using the QR code on the screen. Next slide, please. And so the resources shared today, represent just a few of what's available to support students with disabilities. We also offer an instructional resources webpage, which has many of the resources that I've shared with you. There's also a math toolkit on that webpage to support students with disabilities that provides information on the 8 mathematics teaching practices that I shared with you earlier through the videos that showed the teacher with the avatar students. This toolkit features a walkthrough instrument developed in collaboration with stakeholders from across the state to help measure the implementation of these practices. And there's also some additional resources on specially designed instruction as well. And again, all of these are accessed through the instructional resources page, which you can get through the QR code or on the handout. Next slide, please. And so in addition to our web-based resources, our office has launched a free professional learning community designed to support special education teachers called the Kaleidoscope Project. So much like a kaleidoscope, which uses reflection to create colorful patterns, this initiative emphasizes the power of reflective practice in teaching. By examining instructional methods, student feedback, and outcomes, educators refine their approach, creating visible, meaningful change in special education. And so the Kaleidoscope Project focuses on specially designed instruction, or SDI, in the areas of math, literacy, and behavior. And so each participating teacher receives a classroom kit at the conclusion of the community of practice filled with manipulatives tailored to support instruction in math, literacy, and behavior to help with delivering specially designed instruction. And so registration is currently open for our summer 2026 and fall 2026 cohorts. So if you have any teachers that are interested in registering, they can visit the Kaleidoscope webpage, which is available through the QR code on the screen. And I'll also be sure to put that information in the chat as well. From there, the registration is in the gray box on the right-hand side of the page. Next slide, please. And so these are some of the key benefits of teacher participation in the Kaleidoscope project that I shared with you. We've received really great feedback from educators in our first cohort. So as a result, we're currently in our second cohort now. And then as a result of that, we're offering a summer and fall 2026 cohort for special education teachers across the state. So again, if you want to learn more about the Kaleidoscope project, feel free to access the QR code on the previous slide, and I'll put that information in the chat as well. And then you can also, if you search the Kaleidoscope project, it's also in Kentucky Teacher as well. So you can see an article on that to learn a little bit more information. Next slide, please. And so if you have any questions about any of the resources that I've shared with you today, please feel free to reach out to Veronica Sullivan or myself. Our contact information is available on the screen. And so thank you all for giving me the opportunity to share these resources with you today. So thanks, Ruth.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And next up, we have Mickey Ray Marinelli from the Office of Teaching and Learning to share some information with you.
Thank you, Ruth. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you today. I wanted to talk a little bit about the vision for the OTL, as we like to say, and it's supporting districts in increasing access to grade level learning for all students. And so the work that we've done has been supporting districts thus far and really having a focus on strengthening the Tier 1 experience. And so this graphic is something that you'll see referenced in many of our professional learnings and resources. And so it asks folks to take a look at the common instructional vision for each content area. And that's really one of the first considerations that you might ask of yourself and leaders across your schools. You know, is there a common either district or school-based instructional vision that would designate what high quality looks like for each of the content areas? And based on that instructional vision, you'll see the gray area here, which is really the bridge work that will lead to that improved student experience and improved outcomes. And so many of the resources I'm going to be sharing with you today fall under that bridge work. And so accessing strong local curriculum that's grounded in a high quality instructional resource, providing high quality curriculum-based professional learning to all teachers who are supporting instruction in those content areas, and then having mechanisms in place to monitor and coach around high quality instruction when that's applied in classrooms to meet the diverse needs of the students that you serve and support. So on the next slide, I wanted to get in first to just selecting high quality instructional resources. So if you do not yet have HQIR in place, we have resources that can support you in that process. It is very important to do that intentionally. And I know that I don't have to speak that to those of you here, but you have to ensure that the resource that is selected is aligned to your local priorities. That a lot of dissonance can be felt if teachers don't understand the connection between that common instructional vision, the evidence basis for what high quality instruction looks like in that content area, and then the resource that has been adopted. And so the curriculum development process that is linked here is from the Model Curriculum Framework. And within that, it provides guidance specifically on evaluating and then selecting a high quality instructional resource based on your local priorities. There are communication plans that are embedded. You know, Ruth spoke earlier about ensuring that there is stakeholder involvement in that process. So we have communication plans, we have vendor questions that are provided in a toolkit at the end of that section. And then we also have, I've linked here, samples from Kentucky districts around the instructional visions that have been developed over our HQIR pilots that we've partnered with districts on, and then some of our network districts as well. And so I hope that will be a help to you if you do feel as if establishing that instructional vision or maybe refining the one that you already have in place is a necessary step for you in this process. I've also linked in, and Ruth, can you go back? I'm so sorry. I've also linked in the approved K through 12 instructional resource list for reading and writing and math. So those are the two areas in which really we have the authority to provide approved lists. And so we do have that for K-12. We are in the process of putting together a recommended list for science. But in the absence of those, we have some additional supports. We've got the consumer guides for reading and writing, math, math and science. There are instructional alignment rubrics on KY standards for social studies, visual performing arts, the other content areas that aren't represented here on this slide. On the next slide, I'm going to shift to if you have an HQIR in place, a core comprehensive resource, are you or how are you deepening implementation of that resource to support not only your teachers, but that student impact, the student experience and their outcomes? And so in phase 4 of the curriculum development process, there are a lot of leadership tools that we think may be especially helpful. There are supports for setting implementation goals, developing that PL plan, and then even just engaging in quarterly or end of year step backs to kind of take stock of where you are and what next steps may need to be in place to support the implementation process of those resources. And this next one, the curriculum implementation framework, that's one that you may want to star or make note of if you're taking notes today. It is one of the resources that we have the most positive feedback across all of our curriculum implementation supports. So this framework outlines the roles and responsibilities for each stage of curriculum implementation, whether you're just getting started with your launch, whether you're in early implementation, so years 1 through 3, and then ongoing supports that could be from years 3 and beyond. And so there are sort of roles and responsibilities identified for district leaders, for building principals, teachers, and for students across that experience as well. And so I hope that that will be helpful as you're starting to think through what may need to be the next steps. Or do we need to go back and really look at a relaunch for the resource that has already been adopted? And then the last link on this particular slide is around our curriculum-based professional learning guidance. And so there are leadership tools here to support the professional learning piece of this. We know that just adopting the resource and handing that over to the teachers is really not sufficient to ensure that they are able to implement that resource for the benefit of the student experience. And so this has information on structuring professional learning cycles. There's a learning walk protocol that allows district leaders, building principals, instructional coaches, lead teachers potentially to sort of see the high level trends and patterns across the implementation. And it could also be used to target next steps or specifics that you want to focus on for improvement within that process. On the next slide, these additional resources, I would say, are critical tools. And that translates over to our school-based literacy coaches. If you are a part of the Mathematics Achievement Fund grant, our coaches are supported in looking at the PLC processes, and then our network content for the Early Literacy Leadership Network. And then also if you're considering participation in our Mathematics Leadership Collaborative. So the instructional preparation guide is super important for allowing teachers to understand the utilization of the HQIR and how they can prepare for instruction based on what is provided within that resource. So there's a unit internalization protocol for math, for reading and writing and science, lesson internalization for each of those pieces, a lesson rehearsal protocol for particularly complex lessons that you know that the teacher might need to have supports on in delivering that high level instruction, and then student work analysis, which is critical in sort of determining next step and progress monitoring. The question that I will ask you here is, first and foremost, do you have PLCs in place? Is that something that needs to be considered as you think about the student groups that are being served? How are those communities functioning if they are in place? And then do any technical or adaptive changes need to be made to ensure that the subgroup supports are in place? And so, a critical question would be, do you have, beyond the core teachers, do you have your special education teachers at the table to work with those core teachers around the additional accommodations and supports that are needed for students with disabilities? Do you have your English language development teachers as a part of this process to think through how can we support students in accessing and engaging in the Tier 1 instruction that's happening across all classrooms? And those instructional practice guides, that's the second bullet there. Those are tools to support classroom observation, coaching, feedback, and reflection. So they are not meant to be evaluative in nature, but it's meant to help that principal, coaches, district leaders, and other teachers to be able to look at the core actions or the instructional shifts that are critical for those content areas and what moves might have the most impact as you move forward when you start thinking about continuous improvement. On the next slide, if you have HQIR in place, I know that there has been so much information shared here. So I wanted to give you just a starting place. If you remember nothing else of anything that I've said, this continuous improvement playbook for curriculum implementation is going to give a streamlined framework and pathway for using a lot of the tools that I've mentioned thus far. And so you may want to make note of that, put a star beside that, or do something so that you know you would want to go back here as a starting point. The curriculum monitoring toolkit is one of our newest resources, and Misty Higgins, Fox DeMosey, who are our professional learning coordinators, are going to spend a lot of the time in the spring building out additional supports, whether it's webinars, our March leadership content that we conduct across the co-ops will focus on that monitoring toolkit. We have worked some with Dr. Foster's team and certainly Ruth and the Division 180 team around what exists within that toolkit. There's a PLC observation toolkit. There's a shared learning observation toolkit. There are teacher and student surveys that can help you to get that perception data on the feelings around the resources that have been adopted. So I wanted you to have those at the end. And frankly, this may be the best place to start, that playbook. And then the last slide that I have is just the contact information for folks within the Office of Teaching and Learning. So I've got my email address there. Christy Biggerstaff is our Director of Early Literacy. The Letters Training, the Kentucky Reading Academies, our network supports fall under Christy's role, and she would be a great point of contact for you. Our school-based literacy coaches also fall under the Division of Early Literacy. I've already mentioned Fox DeMosey, Misty Higgins. They're transitioning to providing a bit more technical assistance than we've been able to provide before. So I wanted you to have access to them. They really operate at this systems level and can support you in thinking through, well, what should be our implementation goals? How can we better utilize unit and lesson internalization? And so I wanted to make sure that you had their contact information. Crystal Rowland is our Director of the Division of Program Standards. So if you have any sort of standards related questions, what does this look like in the context of HQIR? That would be a really good starting point. She also would be a good connection for MTSS and the work that's happening in that space within the OTL. One of our newest team members is Will Spalding, and he started with us in the fall and is our multilingual learner specialist. To this point, we've not had within the OTL someone to support multilingual learners. And so I think that Will could be a critical support, especially if that's the identified subgroup for the work that you're doing. And then Chelsea Tingle came to us from Henry County. She was assistant superintendent and chief academic officer there, started with us in the fall, and is in place to now support the implementation of the Numeracy Counts Act, which has implications for K through 8. And so I wanted to make sure that you had all of those folks. And thank you, Ruth, for giving me a little bit of space and time today. And we want to be a support to you. We see ourselves as being service providers. And so please reach out at any time. And if I don't have the information, I will definitely work to make sure that I get you in touch with the right folks. So thank you all for the time today.
Thank you so much, Mickey.
So we are about to wrap things up. One thing we wanted to provide you all with before we go is these rubrics for your CDIP and your CSIP with the TSI or ATSI addendum. So not every district or school gets monitored where we go through this rubric and check it. However, this is a good self-assessment tool. It walks you through each of the required elements and what's expected for each of those. So we want to give those to you all. They are also found on our webpage. Additionally, we want to share some of our resources from the District 180 and Office of Continuous Improvement and Support. The first link is going to be the Targeted Support and Improvement webpage. We also have the link to the Continuous Improvement Coaches forums. That way, if you all want to get in contact with them, their contact information is at the top, and you can also fill that out. We also offer something called Continuous Improvement Reviews. This is where a team of our education recovery staff would come into your district or school in order to evaluate and assist you all with your targeted subgroup. We also have Spotlight Schools. You may have seen this. This is a new program where we can partner with you to help you find a school that is already been vetted and they are welcoming to other schools to come in and look at their systems in place that they have in order that you can steal those and bring them back to your school. On that webpage, the schools are listed along with the contact information. You're welcome to reach out and contact those principals on your own, or I'll also be happy to link you with those principals. Some other things is the school improvement planning for performance excellence. That can be found on our webpage, as well as the TSI and ATSI newsletter. This is something that will be new this year and will be forthcoming. On the next slide, we'll have a link for you to give us feedback and for you to ask any questions. There's also going to be a place there for you to put your email so that you can sign up for this newsletter. We also have the National Institute for School Leadership, NISL, that you can sign up for. The link is there as well. And cognitive coaching that has been sent out in the commissioner's weekly message that you can find. And the Principal Partnership Project link is there as well. We always want to invite you all to the Continuous Improvement Summit. That's going to be September 21st through the 22nd in 2026. It's a great place to go at a conference to see all kinds of different strategies that can help these targeted subgroups, as well as just general continuous improvement. Here is a QR code and link for you to provide feedback to us about what would be helpful, what was helpful in this session, what would be helpful in the future. You can sign up for that newsletter, as well as just ask any general questions. We want to be mindful of your all's time. So if you put a question in that form, we'll be sure to get back to you. Please just make sure you provide your email as well.
Trey, can I add one thing?
Absolutely.
And if you all can't see me, this is Jewett Wells, the continuous improvement coach. I just wanted to let you know, Trey mentioned our form that was linked on the previous slide that lists some of the services that continuous improvement coaches can provide. I know many of you know of our work and have probably seen us at the Continuous Improvement Summit or at other places, but I just wanted to let you know, if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, or if you're thinking right now your wheels are spinning about how you may need to go back and review what you've already done with your CSIP, that is work that we are happy to help you with, and we are a free service. You don't have to pay for us to come and support that work. So if you feel like you would like some one-on-one coaching and support as you go through this process, feel free to reach out to one of us. There are 5 of us on the team. Jenny and I are the only 2 on the webinar today, but there are 5 coaches. Our contact info is on that sheet. And that's one of the things that we love to do, is come out to schools and sit down side by side with school leaders and help them through this work. So just wanted to kind of let you know, if you weren't aware of that we are available to do that. Feel free to reach out by email.
Again, thank you all so much for being here. We look forward to partnering with you. If there's anything we can do to be assistance, please let us know. That's our contact information that's on the screen right now. My name's Trey Smallwood. I'm the TSI ATSI consultant. You heard a lot from Ruth Swanson today. She's our branch manager. Veronica Bowler is also on our team focusing on CSI schools. All 3 of us are always willing to help you, answer any questions. And if we can't answer them, we'll be sure to get that information to you. But we would love for you to fill out this form to give us feedback, and so we can answer any questions you all might have. I will make sure that the copy of the slides and this recording of the presentation is sent to all of our ATSI principals and superintendents as well.
Thank you all for joining us today, and really appreciate our colleagues who joined us to share incredible resources that are available to schools and districts out there. Let us know what we can do to help. Thank you.